Another race weekend in the books and another new winner for the 2024 season. This past weekend's race at Phoenix was very interesting in terms of how you would rate it if it was good or if it was bad. I'm going to be breaking down my opinion and giving it my overall rating, but before we get into that, I'd like to apologize. I didn't have a predictions video for this race. I ran into some time constraints during the week, so I couldn't make one. But with that, let's dive into the video. Denny Hamlin led the field to the green flag, but would drop out of the lead almost immediately as the other Toyotas that started up in the top 5 flexed more muscle and quickly got around him. I honestly expected this as the other Toyotas that were up there, like Eric Jones and Tyler Reddick, had better lap averages in practice, and Denny Hamlin was really probably the 10th quickest car in 20 lap average, and his car just wouldn't fire off. Early on, we saw a multi-car crash that included Derek Kraus, Austin Dillon, and Austin Cindric. I'm not sure what Derek Kraus is doing in a Cup car, but hopefully we can end that experiment and maybe get somebody who's more deserving into that ride. This wreck was unfortunate for Austin Dillon as he was involved in 3 crashes within the first few laps of all 3 races this year. It'll be interesting to see moving forward if Austin Dillon could actually point his way into the playoffs or if he'll need a win for the hole that he dug himself. I was surprised early on at the lack of passing from cars who had fast lap averages in practice but had poor qualifying runs. Joey Logano had one of the fastest 15 and 20 lap averages, but unfortunately couldn't get his way to the front of the field, whereas other drivers who had lap averages that were extremely poor were able to hold their track position due to the next-gen car and its struggles at the Phoenix Raceway. It almost seemed like very few cars had the opportunity to go up and pass for positions. Especially with this new short track package, it was pretty disappointing to see that it actually didn't fix anything with the short track racing. Now I would like to mention this as I want to cover everything about this race and not be biased towards one side or another. We did see the highest number of green flag lap passes with the next gen car at Phoenix Raceway. We saw 2,813 green flag passes, almost 300 higher than the previous amount of passes, so I'm a little bit confused in the sense that it seemed like there was little to no passing outside of the few cars that were dominant. Even when the cars had fresher tires, it almost seemed like they were stuck in traffic and not able to move forward through other cars. Tyler Reddick is a perfect example of this. Towards the end of the race, he really couldn't make his way back to the front of the field after having one of the most dominant cars during the race, and he had some of the freshest tires. I wonder if this number though is a bit skewed, as there were plenty of green flag runs, and this number would include green flag pit stops as passes, as cars were pitting and other cars were passing them while they were still on the track. But I will say, as long as that we can have a record here, maybe it was a good thing, but maybe it is a little bit skewed. Now, I just mentioned Tyler Reddick's struggles at the end of the race, but early on he would go on to win stage 1, and it seemed he had the dominant car. But later on, like I said, he just couldn't go up and pass people, which was strange, as Christopher Bell, who would go on to win stage 2 and look like he had an equally dominant car as Tyler Reddick, was able to drive through the field and pass. So maybe it was just a setup thing, but I just found it a little bit weird that one car was able to do it and another car wasn't, even though they both had great speed in practice. We saw our typical restarts at Phoenix where they would get 4, 5, even 6 wide, but then after a few laps it just seemed like the field would get spread out, and with this new package for short tracks and how poor the racing is, the racing just didn't look attractive after the 3rd or 4th lap following the restart. And I'm not saying that every race has to be like a super speedway or side-by-side action all the time, but it's almost like it was nearly impossible for 90% of the field to pass in the back of the pack after the restarts, and then it was just like it just died off. During the final stage, we saw another multi-car crash that would occur in turn 1 that involved Joey Logano, Derek Kraus yet again, Corey LaJoie, and Zane Smith. Now, John Hunter Nemechek was the one who caused this wreck as he got into the back of Joey Logano and punted him into the corner. Logano did show his displeasure with Nemechek during his interview. Now, yes, John Hunter got into the back of Joey Logano, but I have a take on this. There's more to this. It's so tough to pass, and drivers are going to make even more aggressive moves trying to get position on one another, and in the turns, they're going to misjudge it, especially with this car where it's not even that you can have the better car to drive up and pass. You need to put your car in a position where you can make the pass. It's not that your car is better on the top or the bottom. You physically have to put your car in a position where it's uncomfortable for the other driver. Unfortunately for John Hunter, he misjudged it a little bit more than he was expecting and got into the back of Logano. Yes, John Hunter Nemechek is at fault for this wreck, but it goes on beyond him just getting into the back of Logano. This is also a product of how poor the racing is on short tracks. I mean, realistically, if the cars were able to pass each other like they should, John Hunter Nemechek easily could have rolled the top, went to the bottom, but because of how poor this car is, he had to try to make a more aggressive move, and unfortunately it just caused a wreck. And that's what you're going to see with these deals at these short tracks. It's just drivers that are really trying hard and are going to be messing up more because they can't drive the car to their talent level. And then later on, Denny Hamlin would spin on his own, leading to a caution and essentially flipping the script of this race, as certain drivers were able to take advantage of this caution and save gas or tires, so we saw a completely different finishing order than I think we would have saw if the race played out under green. I still think Christopher Bell would have went on to win. He had the best car in every category of lap averages in practice, 10, 15, 20, but I don't think we would have saw other guys like Michael McDowell or Chase Briscoe and some other people who finished up in the top 10 finish in the top 10 if the race didn't essentially flip and gift them those positions. Now, Christopher Bell would go on to win this race, like I just said, and he would win by over 5 seconds. Now, this was the largest margin of victory with the next-gen car, which was honestly another record. So again, it's something to consider when we're going to rate this race, but it's honestly not a good record. I mean, yeah, we want close races, but we don't want it to be artificial. We don't want gimmicks. Once in a while, you're going to get a race that's like this, where it's a little bit of a snoozer, and you're going to get a guy that drives away. But the fact that it was the largest margin of victory for the next-gen car has to say something. Christopher Bell did have the most dominant car, and kudos to Chris Buescher. He was a driver that I really wanted to put in my prediction video if I made one, because he was dominant in the championship race last year, even won a stage. Overall, I think the race wasn't the best Phoenix race with the next-gen car. I still think the two 2022 races were probably the best. I think last year's spring race was the worst. So if I'm going to rank all 5 of them, I would probably say this is 3rd or 4th. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give it a generous rating of a 6 out of 10. There were cautions that bunched the field back up and made the racing more attractive with those 4 and 5 wide restarts, but then after that, the field kind of mellowed out, and if there weren't those restarts and that chaos and the caution that flipped the race in the final stage, I think that race would have even been worse, and probably the worst Phoenix race with the next-gen car, and I probably would have rated it a 3 or 4 out of 10, but with the benefit of the doubt, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I think that's fair, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. I appreciate you guys sticking with me this week. It was a tough week for me to make some videos, but looking forward to the current week. I'll have a lot of new content coming out, and I know you guys will like it, so thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.